So on this training section, we will be starting to have a look at the deployment of Mergin Maps, namely the important environmental variables that you need to take attention and to modify on your host machine. So a bit of an overview about what we'll be doing in the next video, which will be the deployment itself, a hands-on deployment. So first we need to clone the Mergin Maps repository from GitHub, locate ourselves into the proper Mergin Maps Edition folder, in this case for our training the deployment/enterprise edition, and then we need to set up the environment by copying the provided env.template file into a production one, let's say the .prod.env that we will tweak. On this video we will have an overview of the most important environmental variables that you need to pay attention, namely the required ones and the most important ones. So in the documentation they are listed here in this page, and these environmental variables are more or less in per sections, let's say, are categorized by sections, so that it's easy for you to follow up and to later on have an overview about them, but we will go through them one by one. So the first section is related with server basics. So there is this, by the way, the star variables are the ones that needed to be modified, so you need to check them by default and tweak them. So the first one is Mergin base URL, sorry. So this is basically the URL or the IP of your host machine where Mergin Maps will be based in order for the proxy to work. And this by default is blank, of course, so you need to have your own host URL or IP of the machine. Next is the collect statics environmental variable. In this case we are talking about the Enterprise Edition, so it by contract terms definition it needs to be turned to true, turned on, let's say, which is by default, as we can see here, default. So it should remain as it is. The contact email for the, let's say, the administrator of the platform, it should be visible and should be also here filled, this environmental variable. The service ID, you can have your own ID, so should be a UUID type of string, but don't worry too much about it because this will be auto-generated on the first deployment if it's not set. So I wouldn't bother too much about it. If you want to know which UUID your host machine has, during, as we will see later on the deployment, during the first provisioning of the host machine, the UUID will be given to you as a string as a result of a command line. Next we do a section related with security settings. This is very important for production use, of course. And we start with the bearer token expiration, basically how long the authorization bearer token lives in the cache, let's say, of the system. By default I believe it's 12 hours, I think. So this default here is in seconds, so you can tweak it around your own usage. You can set it longer for one entire day of usage, or maybe even less. The secret key for the authorization here. So a string should be generated a strong string for this. The same thing for the email. So as token salt for sending verification for emails, for the bearer, and for the password. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4 different strong strings here are required. You can use a random generator, whatever. Even if it's a strong string, you are safe on that security side. So also this should be always enabled by default. So the CSRF verification. So this is on, and also the token limit in seconds. I believe it's for a period of 24 hours by default, but you can also tweak this if you want to have a token with a less lifetime. These ones here are marked as important because you need to change them, because they are not granted, of course, because by default we derive our production environmental file from a template file, and if you don't change this, everyone should know your secrets. Moving on to the database settings. So a bit of overview here. So by default, on the default deployment of Mergin Maps, database is available for you as part of a Docker service deployment. But of course, if you already have enterprise running on your organization, and you just want to have there a dedicated database for Mergin Maps application stuff, of course you can redirect Mergin Maps host to that specific database. In that case, you will need to tweak the host here. So by default, the host is the service name on the Docker Compose file. So you need to change this to the host URL or IP of the target machine. Also, you should change the default database that is created by default, which is the Postgres one. And of course, the password as well, the DB user. Sorry, this is not, this should be here and not here. So just to make it more easy to read. Here is the database application name. So just a comment on the database side for you to check what this database is about. And the port you can also change. By default, it uses the default Postgres port. The pool of connections, the size of the pool, and the timeout. Those are the things that you can tweak on the database settings side from Mergin Maps. Moving on to the user management. This is only available for Enterprise Edition. So you can, by default, all the users can self-register on your platform, but you can disable this. So basically only an admin user or super user can have new users on the platform, or they can invite new users. So new users, let's say, it cannot register themselves on the platform as it is the default behavior. Also, the super admin assignment is true. If you don't want to have assignments of the super user to another user from the admin panel, if you want to have this assignment done only on the command line level, let's say. So easy, not easy for a common user to do this from the admin UI. On the permission management level, this is only for Community Edition, this section here. This is to tweak a little bit about the users, so we will skip it. Next session is to send emails. So basically, Mergin Maps uses the default settings of a SMTP server to send notifications and emails about the syncs, errors, etc., invites, etc. So this is pretty normal. So you have here these three at least required ones. So what is the target SMT mail server, if it's one local machine that you use, or if it's a cloud-based instance type of thing. Here the default email sender, so it can be a generic user for sending emails from Mergin Maps platform, or generic email in this case. Account. If you want to suppress mail sending, so by default it's false. If you don't want to have the emails to be sent, you need to flag this to true. Here some settings. Of course, you will need a SMT server account. This is the username to add, the password, if the server uses TLS and or SSL. Here, if you want to send a copy of the sent emails to another account, you can also set it here. And if you want to add your own company logo on the emails, you can have it here. The logo on a local path, and then you just need to have it here, the logo, and with the relative path at the container level, of course. Never forget that. So in terms of workspace management, so in the Community Edition this is very limited, because the workspace management is a feature of Enterprise Edition. So you have here the default workspace storage size environment variable, which is by default 500 megabytes. So you can tweak this number to more or less by default storage size, but bear in mind that you can fine-tune this in the admin panel of the Mergin Maps UI. So you can have one workspace with 100 megabytes, another workspace with 5 gigabytes. So you can make this fine-tuning after you create the workspace. This is the expiration limit for the pending invitation for a new workspace. So it will be by default 14 days that the workspace will be there until someone picks it up, if you have this policy of only allow admins or super users to add new workspaces. Also, if you want to transfer projects in between workspaces, there is a expiration period in order to save some space on the machine side, which is 7 days. The default expiration of the workspace, this is meant to have like a security measure if you accidentally delete one workspace, for example. So you have it, after you hit the delete button, it will stay there for a given amount of days, in this case by default 7. So you can recover the workspace within this time span if someone accidentally deleted it. And this is very important on the company level. If you want to allow normal users, let's say read only, editor only type of users to have to create workspaces or not. This is enabled by default, but it might be a good option to disable it at some installations. On the data synchronization and management level, you have these environment variables. So local projects are by default stored in a root level attached to the container. You can see on the Docker compose file volume mapping this folder here, but of course you can change this into another volume or location on your host machine. For example, if you want to have the projects on high-speed type of disks and you mount a volume on top of it, so you redirect these local projects string to the target folder path. The same for temp directory. So by default it is in the Docker mapping file. A maintenance file. So this is a special file in order to indicate that the server is on maintenance mode, so read-only mode. And this is also can be attached to the volumes mapping of the compose file. A blacklist of folder paths that you want to ignore for the syncing of the Mergin Maps feature. So basically, if you have on a project level these directories and other, so you can have multiple ones by simply having a comma in between the strings. So basically the sync mechanism will ignore these folders when doing the sync. This is useful if you have like big static data that is not often changed and you want to keep it out from the sync, etc. So a generic file expiration trick here that you can have on your geo package files, in other let's say that are in the syncing process files, that you can have it on a lifetime in seconds, and you can change it, of course. This is basically to keep some original data in between the syncs on the host side, in order for you, if you need to have some kind of a manual overview of the versioning system in between, you can still recover from the original files. This is the log file expiration, so the time in seconds a project being logged while updated. This means that a project is more or less locked for a given period of time in between syncs, in order to not have too much conflict in between the syncs. So it is a security measure. Max chunk size is basically how many bytes in each chunk will be on during the sync procedure. So the sync procedure, if you have a geo package of 100 megabytes, for example, with the default chunk size of 10 megabytes, I think it will be split into 10 chunks basically. So this speeds up a bit the syncing procedure, and depending on your network, if it's local or not, you can tweak a bit this number here. By default, I believe it's around 10 megabytes each chunk. Here is the max download archive types. So in Mergin Maps user interface, there is an option to download a project in a zip file. and by default you can download up to 10 gigabytes if a project is at that size. This may work well in local networks, but may be a bit too large for a normal, let's say, normal download from a cloud instance or some or if a server is hosted on a given provider, that may lag a little bit in speed. So you can tweak this number in order to have a lower number below the 10 gigabytes, which is the default maximum size for the project in an archive. So the project can be even bigger, but the important thing is how much the zip file will be at the end. So it must be 10 gigabytes or lower in order for the download to work. This one here is the a proxy setting for performance. This should even be removed. Let's say it should always be on, so you don't need to tweak this in order to affect the performance. Here is the account expiration. So basically how much days you have until the account projects and files, related files of the account, are deleted. So if a user wrongly or an admin wrongly deletes a user, he can still have some, in this case, 1 day to recover all their data, to recover the account, let's say. The same thing for the project expiration. So when you delete a project via the UI, the project is not really, let's say, deleted. It's kind of an async job that will be hanging there for, in this case by default, for 7 days, and then after these 7 days the project is actually deleted. In between this time you can always restore the project if needed. Here is also a lifetime of a project access request. If someone requests access to a given project, the request will be active during this amount of time. This is in seconds in this case. And also the same thing for temp expiration. So files in the temp directory are kept for 7 days before they are permanently deleted. So this might be useful because the sync process uses a lot of temporary files, and if you want to have the temp folder mounted on a very high-speed disks and stuff like that to ease the sync process, you can even tweak lower this number in order not to have too many data on this temporary directory. So most of the tasks that Mergin Maps uses under the hood are basically commanded by the Celery and executed by Redis. So these jobs are done by default using the provided Redis instance that you have on the normal provisioning of a Mergin Maps deployment. So we have a dedicated server for this, and we have a single queue for every jobs. But if you already have a Redis instance on your institution and you want to reuse this instance and have a specific queue for Mergin Maps jobs, you just need to redirect the broker URL and the result backend for Celery to return the job results. This is a new feature, recent, so the diagnostic logs can now be saved on the local instances. By default, they are saved on a specific folder of the deployment. I think it's called diagnostics logs as well. Yeah, exactly, it's here. But you can also change this into a specific location. For example, if you want to have like a cold storage type of thing and you want to have the diagnostics logs there, or if you can keep sending them to our endpoint, which was the old behavior, you can set this to this URL address, and this will be sent to our cloud instance in order for us also to check what is going on with your host machine. Also, a feature that is only available on the Enterprise Edition Mergin Maps, which is the web maps. So these are the settings that you need to enable. So Mergin Maps by default, web maps are enabled by default. You can disable them if you don't want to use it. And these are the vector tiles URL and the correspondent style that you want to use to this background layer, which are using our own instances here. But of course you are free to use other instances if you have another account in another vector tile provider, or if you have your own vector tile server enabled, of course. Just a quick reminder that you need to contact our sales team in order for them to whitelist your host IP or URL in order for you to fetch our default background map. So this is part of the contract. You can have access to this, but you need to send us a message in order for us to whitelist your instance. And lastly, also a new feature, which is the single sign-on, very useful on relatively big enterprises, let's say, with a lot of users. It eases the way that user accounts are created, and you can also reuse your own SSO, existing SSO accounts. So by default, this is disabled. So this is another feature that you need to add to your contract on Mergin Maps. And if enabled, we provide you via the Jackson Boxy backend. We have available a service that connects to that backend, and I think you need to pay per connection monthly. I'm not sure, but of course you can use your own existing SSO server, if it's a local one or a service one existing that your company uses, and you just need to add here the URL of the SSO server as well as the API key. So this wraps up the available environmental variables that you need to have into consideration when you are deploying Mergin Maps. And on the next video we will do a hands-on first deployment of the Mergin Maps project into our local host machine, and then we tweak some of these environmental variables.